And we're recording.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone. I want to call to order the meeting of the Hartford Subcommittee of the MARB. It is October 22nd, and today somebody has some background noise, so please put your phones on mute or your computer. Today I am chairing on behalf of Secretary McCaw. I'm her designee for this committee, and the co-chair won't be joining us today, but we have a full agenda, and so I'm going to hold on the minutes at this moment and give another members to an opportunity to join. So I'm going to move on to agenda item number 3 and ask the city to please give us an update on your corrective action plan for fiscal year 2019. And the Board of Ed also has some corrective action plan to be addressed. So let's start with the city. Mayor, who would you like to discuss this?
I think, Leanne, is that over to you?
Good morning. Actually, we can kick it over to Mike. He got the updates from MHIS.
Oh, okay. I wanted to make sure I didn't want to jump in too early. Yeah, so what you'll find in front of you, and good morning to everybody, by the way. The letter that was prepared, or the status chart that was prepared in the past, I was asked to update it. And really the two updates are in the last two items there, number 9 and number 10. Both of these are related to the policies and procedures, and then the disaster recovery plan. The additional comment that you do see in your report there was due to the cyber attack that we had. As everybody knows right now, there was a lot of standstill with the city in regard to being able to access some files overall for people to continue with their normal work. But in addition, there was many of the computers had to be reprogrammed, reviewed for
sorry, Steve Felsigno, I apologize for being late.
Who is that? Sorry.
Steve Felsigno, I apologize for my tardiness.
You're fine, Dave. Thank you for joining us. Go ahead, continue, Michael.
Okay, I'm sorry. So over the past 5 to 6 weeks, the city has had to concentrate on getting access, both on the Board of Ed side and on the city side, to people's computers, files, get them usable. As such, the two items on here, number 9 and 10, unfortunately did have to be put to the side momentarily. I did have discussions with the COO, and then also she also talked to MHIS, and had this response, which is included here, basically saying that we are continuing to move forward, but it hit a delay pattern because of the attack, and there is a 90-day extension that is being requested or foreseen in order to complete these tasks. And that really applies to both number 9 and 10 on this form.
Okay, thank you. And, we do understand that your attention and IT's attention had to be shifted in a different area. So understanding the situation that Hartford is in. One other item that is open is number 3, the laptop computer security, right? Guys, you have a document included in the packet for us today, talking about that as well, correct?
Yes, that is the same status as before, where really it can't continue to be encrypted until people are back on site working, whether that it's going to be changed in the, in the future to try to have people come back or not is yet to be established,
But that you're
is my
saying,
understanding.
okay, within the fire department?
There is that is another document. I mean, we could hit that after, but the comment on the fire department, they did get their completion done during the month of September. And then there's further clarification further down concerning the police department as far as what their breakdown was in equipment was and where it is and what the accesses are. That was filed as like a supplementary response. If you want, I can go down to that now.
If you want me to wait, I can wait. I just wasn't sure.
That's farther down in the presentation.
Very good. We can address it under other and,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome. Okay, there is another corrective action item in here from the Board of Ed. Did I have that right, Julian? Let me check.
Yes.
I just messed up my papers, so forgive me.
So there's another table that follows the
Right, right.
city's findings, and it's specific to the Board of Ed year-end close process.
So, David, Board of Ed, could you bring us up to date on your corrective action plan, please?
Absolutely. Good morning. Hey, so I'm not sure if this document has been shared before, so it might be the first time. So if you can spare me 30 seconds to kind of ground the team, and then I'll get you into some details. But we really tried, at least when I just came back in, I'm just trying to look at the findings and the recommendations in a manner that, we can articulate back to this group as well as use it internally for a management process. So we've really taken the recommendations, split them 4 ways. The first one is really around formal year-end procedures. So that is not only how are you going to walk through the annual process, but then more importantly, how do we start to document those procedures and have them almost lifted right off the shelf as new folks come into the organization. The second and third really around people, and it's a combination of ensuring that folks that are part of our year-end close process are clear in their roles and responsibilities. Adding to that, we wanted to add kind of a second layer per se into the close process whereby we'd not only have a reviewer, but we'd also have a preparer. So under any individual task, we have 2 people that could take a look at it to ensure that it's being performed adequately. And then the third piece there was just some staffing needs, which is really what really got the team into this issue in the first place, which is around just trying to get some qualified and some additional staffing. And then the last piece, I've added this piece in just recently because as I look around the organization, I just think there needs to be some attention now to, not only satisfying the audit requirements, but now starting to look at the organization as we think about the staff makeup and the length of service. And, there's a good proportion of folks here that have some institutional knowledge, maybe similar to the state and or the city, that have been here for a while, that are either in or close to retirement age. So I think we need to start to draft some outlines around how do we start to move through a short and long-term plan to address the cross-training of that institutional knowledge and make sure there's sustainability there. So that's kind of the grounding on the document itself and sort of how the preparation got us to where we are now. We really have sort of 3 items that are open. So one is around the documentation of the year-end procedures. We have some documentation, at least when I reviewed it, I just wasn't comfortable with it. I think it just needs to be dusted off and cleaned up some more. So our county supervisor is working on that, and that commitment is to be completed by year end. The second one is around some staffing. So we have 2 roles that are posted. One we're feeling really good about. We think we're going to have some we're gonna try to get some interviews in over the next 2 weeks, and we have some candidates there that we think will be helpful. We're still struggling, quite honestly, in finding another qualified accountant. So that is someone who has some richness in accounting background and also familiarity with, sort of school district or governmental accounting. So we haven't had any success there. And then the last one, which is sort of the ongoing, which is, once we get the folks in, getting some cross-training going, and then starting to document the sustainability of the organization.
Very good. David, thank you so much for pulling all of this together. For the committee's sake, I want you to know that myself and Julian had met with David and got an overview and really dived into his plan in detail. And I really think that he's done a great job in putting some structure around this. And now we've been waiting for some time to hear this and to know that somebody is paying attention to this. So David, I am glad that you're here and glad that you're able to provide this content to the committee.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for providing some recommendations as well. That was really helpful coming back in.
You're no problem. I'm glad to hear that you're moving forward. Good luck with your 2 searches. If the search that failed on the accountant side, I don't know if you have an opportunity to, if you get into a worst case scenario of, sometimes you have to bring in a temp with a temp to hire, and then you get that opportunity of actually test driving them. If all fails, and, don't wait too long,
Yeah, no, I think we're, the role was closed on Monday, and I think that's a path we're going to have to go down just to get some help.
Okay. Any questions for the members to David on the corrective action plan for Board of Ed?
This is Mark.
Yes, Mark.
When you mention cross-training, being familiar with the Board of Ed side of things, and especially Hartford, am I to understand that, like any institutionalized system, that you're finding silos of institutional knowledge-based individuals where they're operating in a past practice that is no longer beneficial or should be in operations to look at the system as a whole rather than their own particular silo? I think that's the hardest, especially in a large organization like Hartford's. That's the hardest thing to break, to stop operating in a silo-minded methodology into a cross-training organizational methodology, which would be more advantageous in today's new world, supposedly. But is that what I'm hearing you trying to establish on the Board of Ed side?
Yeah, you're exactly right, Mark. And at least what I've told the team is, and I think you're right in terms of changing the culture per se, and in terms of sharing information and being comfortable with cross training in a manner that advances the organization, doesn't necessarily hinder the organization. So we've had that discussion, and I think, in all fairness, so if you think about this organization, we're in 3 different buckets. We're sort of budgeting, accounting, and, sort of processing, AP, that type of stuff. And I think 2 out of the 3, I think the accounting and AP side of the group is really bought into this. I think they're actually excited about it. I think they feel like there's opportunity here because some of the new folks coming in either just don't agree or just don't like the way some of the procedures were managed historically. So I think there's some opportunity there. And then, just like any organization, I think we still have one group that we need to kind of intermingle in this process and try to figure out now how do we make it a full system of activities rather than 3 independent departments. So yeah, I think we're making some progress, and we got some early good feedback. Push comes to shove when we start to actually do it, but I think so far so good.
That's good to hear, because the culture changes within such a large organization as that is difficult to change. But as you said, as people retire, new people come in, with new and different ideas, those are opportunities that you will have to change that culture. So that's good to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and I won't go any further. I think, just the other challenge on ours is the last thing I mentioned, which is I just have to make sure as we're going through some of the change and the cultural change and the new folks are coming in that we have a way to kind of take that snapshot and make sure that institutional knowledge doesn't leave too early on us, that we've got all that captured.
I agree.
Certainly. Yeah, it's maneuvering through all of that.
Yeah.
Very good. Anybody else on the committee that has a question for the Board of Ed? Okay, since we have a quorum, I'm just going to shift back and ask for a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Bob White, so moved. Second.
Thank you. Bob, I'm putting you in as second. Mark is the move. Any discussion? And a roll call for the vote.
Okay. Matt Brockman, I know Matt did jump on the meeting during that last discussion, but he might be muted. I'll just come back to Matt. Steve Felsigno, come back to Steve also. Bob White,
Aye.
Mark Waxenberg,
Yes.
Ken Kennison,
Yes.
and let's go back. Matt Brockman,
You have David Billerton.
and has David Billard joined the meeting? And one more time for Steve Felsigno.
Aye, sorry about that.
Okay.
It came through after the fact.
Okay.
Who is that? Who is the
That
aye?
was Steve.
Oh.
So we have 4 aye votes.
Okay.
If Matt wants to send me his vote after the fact, I can record it. But that's 4 would approve the minutes.
Correct. Okay, thank you. The minutes have been approved, and we will then, thank you, Julian. We will move on to agenda item number 4 on the agenda today, status of the fiscal year end close. And I would also like to hear about the audit timeline. Mayor, who will be holding that discussion today? Leanne or Jalika?
I can jump in as needed, Kim. I don't know if we lost the mayor or not.
Leanne, please get started. We'll let the mayor interrupt if he chooses.
Okay, so I'll start with the audit timeline. Included in your package is a listing of the tentative audit dates. Just a quick update, Bloom Shapiro reached out earlier this week and asked if they could start the audit on Monday, since some of their staff had freed up. So we will be kicking off field work on Monday, October 26th. And Bloom Shapiro will be working in a combination of remote and on-site, doing the year-end audit review field work from the 26th through November 9th, the week of November 9th. Anticipating to have a draft report issued by December 11th. And then we'll have obviously a back and forth comment period between that draft issuance and December 23rd, where we'll have all the final MD&A discussions returned, all final draft comments in, looking to issue the report on time by December 31st.
Okay. Leanne, December 31st, is it on time and that you're looking for a deliverable on December 31st? Because I think that's bringing it right to the wire.
Yeah, so, Kim, if the final is ready prior to December 31st, then we'll issue then. But our plan right now is to be on time, right to the wire. Obviously, we fell a little behind on our side getting ready for the audit with the ransomware attack because, you know, as mentioned earlier, we lost access to our internal files. Recently got that back. Currently getting these financials completed. You know, the city has about 80 funds that we have to complete the financial statements for. So we are making headway and feel that we'll be ready to start field work a week early on some of the funds, but we'll have all of the funds done by November 2nd for the auditors to really run off with and do their field work on. So, you know, the ransomware attack put a little kink in the plan, but I think we'll be able to work through it and issue timely.
Okay. You know, okay. I hope that you know, to New Year's Eve is not a good date. Is what nobody wants to work on New Year's Eve.
Oh, no. At that point, you know, it's once we get the draft report, it's really just the tweaking of the file, and we usually have the draft report in the middle and by the beginning of December. You know, pushing it to the end is really just for cleanup options, making that we dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's. We won't active field work. Everything will be done by the week of the 9th, and Bloom is actively reviewing completed financial statements. So it's not like we'll be working on the financial statements until December 31st.
Yeah. Okay. With them starting early, are you prepared for them to start early, or is it just that they're freed up? Or
our entire files are not ready, but we have some of the more complicated financial statements that take Bloom Shapiro a good chunk of time to review. Most of those are ready.
Okay.
Yeah. So we can definitely keep them busy next week.
Very good. Any questions from the members? All right, then we will move on to agenda item number 5. It's going to discuss the Board of Ed and the budget, the projected final expenses and where we're at. So David?
Sorry, I'm talking with mute on. Yeah, so there should be I just sent Julian yesterday morning a general fund budget report. And maybe I'll just take you through the highlights, but we ended the year with about, I'm going to take it to the far right-hand corner there where the balance is, about a $5.1 million fund balance. Of that, 2.7, I'm trying to use the right words because I'm not really versed in this, but 2.7 will essentially be used as part of the 2%, I don't know if you want to call it reserve, or Julian had the better words yesterday when I was talking to him, but
Reserve.
So that leaves a balance of a little over 2.3, about 2.383 million. And then we still have an outstanding item. I know Leanne's aware, corporate counsel is aware, but there's a dispute with Autumn Transportation on any potential expenditures that we might owe them during the shutdown. I'm assuming that was probably May through June-ish or so, which kind of falls in accordance with I'm not sure, I don't have the number from one of the executive orders. So we think that's valued around $940,000, $945,000. But I think that's kind of out of our scope right now. I think it's in the hands of corporate counsel. But essentially the dispute was, once the schools shut down, Autumn Transportation had requested that the Board of Ed reimburse them for not only their the salaries of the drivers and the healthcare costs of the drivers that really are kind of encompassed in the executive order, but also rent, utilities, leases, essentially most of our operating costs, which we have disputed. So we have agreed to pay, I think verbally agreed to pay the salary portion of it, which is the 940 some odd thousand. Have requested the information from them and just have not received the records, payroll records to substantiate it. But I think it's kind of left from at least when I understand when I came back in here, it's kind of left our desk, and now I'm not sure if Howard or Lori are involved in this one. So if you exclude maybe 940,000 from that, it leaves us with a fund balance of about 1.4 million.
Thank you, David. Are you saying the 1.4 million is the portion that we think that would be going back to the city, that you're not going to be asked? I know you have a 2% requirement and for the reserve, unless Leanne, you happen to know what the thoughts are in this?
No, I think I think that would be after the 2% reserve ask.
Okay.
The only thing, again, as I learned about this, and I actually just learned a little bit more last night, I think there might be a little bit more caution, and corporate counsel could hopefully help us. But, this bus situation with Autumn, it's the 940,000, which I think we have, capacity here in the excess fund balance. Their other portion of this leases and the rent and utilities is a little over $1.5 million that we have argued we should not pay. So I just wanted to make sure the group was aware of that. But right now, the 1.4 is sort of the excess balance, yes.
A question. So if the overhead claim of 1.5 is allowed, does that wipe out your fund balance?
Yes, it would. Yep.
I mean,
the excess, Bob,
The
because they still have a number, because you're at 5 million, they still have the 2.3. Do I have that right? 2.3?
That's correct.
To go to reserve already.
That is
But
correct.
I thought that from the 2.3, you take away the 945, which is conceded, and there's another $1.5 million on top of that.
Well, there could be a potential. There could be another potential $1.5 million on top of that, depending on corporate counsel's opinion on this one.
Right. So that the fund balance was 2.3. You take away the 945, which you agree is owed. Is that correct?
That's
leaving
correct.
1.4.
Yep.
Leaving 1.4, and then there's 1.5 in dispute, and if it all goes awry, then it wipes out your fund balance. So 1.4 is again, this is over and above your 2%. The 1.4 is subject to diminution depending on the outcome of what legal thinks.
Well, I think even the 940 is as well. They've never.
Oh, it is. Oh, okay.
Yeah, my understanding is that they haven't even provided us with adequate payroll records to substantiate. So we're trying to estimate what that looks like.
I see. So you've agreed that in concept, that whatever salary was expended, there would be a reimbursement. You're just not sure of what that number is.
That is correct. We've asked for some payroll records. As an example, they've given us some
Of
payroll
course.
records. Just doesn't match.
Of course.
Yep.
Right. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. It's Leanne. So part of the issue with the bus contract is because it's sitting in the unknown. And if there's a lawsuit that results as part of this dispute between the board and the transportation company, then most likely that's going to take us beyond year end, and it would come out through a legal settlement at a future point in time. So we wouldn't be able to do much with the 900,000 in the Board of Ed's estimate for year-end surplus.
If that is under dispute, and you get to the end that it still is under dispute, I think the auditors, I know what I would do, is if I was in the position, is I would suggest that a reserve is set up for that, as the potential liability.
Right, and they typically would do that reserve, Kim, at the corporation counsel settlement level, which goes to the statement of net assets. It wouldn't be drilled down to the fund statements.
Yes. Okay.
Kim, I have a question
just,
about the 2%, if I can get a
Please do.
clarification question on that. Is
Yes,
the
please.
2% policy, is that a cap on or ceiling on how much may be committed for future Board of Ed, or is it a target? Like how is that policy? What's the structure around that 2%?
This is Luke Bronin, and I'm sorry for jumping in, but I just want to, I mean, my understanding of that 2% is that is the statutory maximum reserve that a Board of Ed can carry without affecting the MBR. The mechanism of how that goes over there, it comes back to the city, and then we would have to dedicate it back up to that 2% maximum, assuming that the city council, decides that I submit that to the council, and the council decides to do that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other questions concerning the Board of Ed and their year-end balance?
Kim, if I could, it's Leanne. I just
Yes,
wanted to
please.
clarify what Dave had mentioned earlier. So of the 5 million estimate of year-end surplus for the Board of Ed, the 2.7 would be in addition to the 2.9 committed fund balance that already exists. And I don't know if you recall from previous conversations with the secretary, she didn't want the Board of Ed to use the 2.9 unless they were incurring a deficit for FY20.
Right.
So the request to,
Yeah.
right. So the request to council is
Yes.
an extension of that $2.9 million because the original resolution said it was to be expended in FY20.
Yes.
So our request would be an extension of the 2.9 plus an additional commitment of 2.7 to get to the total 2% reserve for the Board of Ed.
Very good. Thank you. All right, any other questions here? I'm not able to put my hand on it, Leanne, but while you're still discussing, I know I saw a table about the fund balance of the city. Julian.
Right,
It's
that's
in
the
there.
first, it's the first item in the supplementary section.
Oh, okay, very
I
good.
think in the-
Well, that's where we're going anyways. Perfect. All right, I'm on track. So why don't you continue?
Okay, I'll actually pass the mic over to Mike Lupkis to take this one.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, Mike.
Nope. Mike, you're on mute or?
I'm sorry about that. I had such great comments too. Sorry. This is a schedule that was prepared a couple months ago, and we brought it up to date with our latest numbers. What I would point out to you is, as the audit is being prepared, there's always entries going back and forth, whether it's on the city side or the Board of Ed side. So and the reason I'm saying that, because I see that there is a difference between the page that we were just discussing and the Board of Ed numbers that I have included here. Okay, so mine was prepared using the numbers we had, so I just wanted to point that out.
Very good. Thank
but what
you.
we have, as of currently, you'll see what to the left-hand column there, what our fund balance breakdown was at last June 30th, being unassigned and the committed. That's the $2.9 million of the committed that was set aside last year as part of that 2% allowance or request that the Board of Ed can carry over. It was not percent, it was the available balance. So that being said, as of last week, 3 days ago, the 19th, the city right now is looking at a $14 million surplus on the city side, which that number does contain prior transfers that were discussed, whether it was to capital, whether it was the the civilian police response team. Okay, so those numbers are already recorded on the books. We come down to $14 million. The numbers that we had as of that date for the Board of Education was right around $4.8 million. So the theory behind this is it's going to come out of the Board of Ed money back into the city fund balance. The next column over right there in the middle is the anticipated request that Leanne was just talking about to bring the Board of Ed total set aside up to the 2%. Again, as Leanne had mentioned, the $2.9 million from last year, council will have to take action in order to roll that forward. The 2.7 would be an additional amount coming out of their surplus for this year, which would bring that up to the maximum amount of 2%. 2% of the board's money would be in the extreme right-hand column, would be a total of the $5.68 million, assuming that the council approves the extension or the modification to extend it out another year of the 2.9 and agrees to doing this year's increase. The $5 million that you'll see in the second column from the right, that has also taken place where the mayor has directed finance to assign fund balance of $5 million, which would be set aside. So that comes out of the unassigned under the other category of assigned funds. Overall, our fund balance right now, barring changes as we move forward, we would have, our unassigned would go up to 20.7. We would have the full 2% under the committed funds for the Board of Ed, and the assigned fund balance for the economic uncertainty of the time period we're in, for a grand total fund balance of $31 million. I would point out that there is right now discussion of possibly using some of the surplus we have right now for at the direction of the mayor or items that we're doing that have not been formally proposed yet, but would affect this chart as well.
So thanks, Mike. Let me just jump in on this just to
Please.
add a couple of points. One, the $5 million assignment of fund balance is something that we did discuss at I believe at the last MARB meeting, which is that is an assignment for the establishment of what we are calling an economic uncertainty contingency fund, just given the many unknowns that remain out there about long-term impact on revenue and the overall fiscal situation. So that is what that $5 million represents. Obviously, if that uncertainty does not manifest itself, in a direct fiscal impact, then at some point in the future that would fall back to unassigned fund balance. The last piece that Mike is referencing is, as we get our final numbers, we have a couple of goals. One, I would like to end up with a combined unassigned and assigned fund balance of 5% of budget, which moves us toward, a significant way towards our target of 7%, which is in our plan. If we achieve that and we have some additional surplus, there are a couple of things that we are considering. One is a pre-funding of some additional investment in violence interrupters and community partners that are doing violence reduction work. I'd be happy to talk about that. The second thing would just be additional funds to capital.
Okay, you did mention that, and I thought that was already in the works. So when I originally saw the 1,000, I thought that was for the that education part that you wanted to shore up with.
No.
Okay.
So just to distinguish, what we did already do was transfer, not just assign, but transfer out of fund balance into a special revenue account, $5 million for the design and implementation over a 4-year period of a crisis response team, which is particularly focused on mental health, emotional disturbance calls for service with civilians responding. The gun violence interruption work is obviously related to that, but independent of that. And so, we may be looking to take another $1 million and commit it over probably a 3-year period to allow for an expansion of the gun violence interrupter work that we do.
Very good. That's what I had understood. I didn't realize that a transfer had gone forth already. So in your outcome for the unassigned right now at the 20 million, the 5 was already moved or already
That's right.
Okay. Thank you.
That's correct.
Any questions from members?
This is Bob White. I don't know if this is the place to raise it, but we have discussed the impact of COVID on the budget, and at least my recollection has been that it is being handled with existing funds. At the same time, I hear a raucous debate in Washington about the need for state and local funding to deal with this. I'm just wondering what how to reconcile those two kinds of things, because when I look at this, it looks like folks are doing okay. Does that mean cities and towns don't need the money? I mean, I just don't understand.
So I would say a couple of things. Bob, one, remember that what we're looking at here is fiscal year 2020, so ending
right.
July, June 30th of 2020.
Right.
A big driver of the surplus in 2020, in addition to the attrition savings that we had, was a significant favorability in healthcare expenditures. I think because of the pandemic, people just were not seeking healthcare. We're not, we're delaying we're delaying procedures. There's a lot of healthcare spending that didn't happen. So I think there is a kind of slightly one-time, possibly one-time driver of that surplus in 2020. In 2021, so far, you're right that our revenues have held up. Our tax collection has actually held up very well. and I think that's partly because our tax that we collect is property tax, which is less subject to volatility of sales and income tax. The property values stay stable. However, I think there is a very, very significant risk of a delayed fiscal impact as the economic downturn, affects property values and affects property owners' ability to pay. So we don't know what we're going to face yet, and that's one of the reasons we set aside this $5 million for economic uncertainty. But it may be that amount is nowhere near sufficient. If we go through our reval, and that reval ends up, with a significant reduction in values, particularly on the commercial side, we could have a far larger negative fiscal impact that is impossible to manage without that additional assistance. The other thing I'd say is that I don't think we or any community is doing everything we could or should be doing in response to the pandemic. And so it's true that we are, working hard to make sure our revenues and our expenditures match right now, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be spending a lot more to support our community through a time of unprecedented economic hardship and disruption.
Thank you, Mayor. And my recollection is you're still considering whether or not to request an extension of the reval date. That's still in play. I think that we have landed on a decision to stick with the normal schedule. Okay.
So we're right now proceeding, with the October 2021 reval date, which would show up in the fiscal year 23. And the reason for that is just that, none of us can see over the horizon. We have no idea whether the impact is going to be, whether things are going to be better or worse, a year later.
Okay, good. Thank you. Good luck.
Thanks.
Any other comments from the members? Okay, let's move on to the next agenda item, which will talk about the Board of Ed and wait a minute, do I have that right, Julian? No, it's the golf. We'd like to
I think
I missed.
if the superintendent's available, we were going to get an update on the special ed RFP. But
Right.
Yeah, I don't think she's joined. I think, Julian, she sent a note that she might be able to join at 11, but I haven't.
Well, then we would, if you don't hear from her, then we'll move on. All right, let's move on to the other related business and see if the superintendent joins after we. Mike, can you give us an update on the Golf Enterprise Fund and the works that you have pulled together in that area?
Yes, sure. It starts with, page 13 is kind of the introduction page. There was last month, Bob Bakers had submitted a series of paperwork and numbers analysis for the golf course, which did bring up some additional questions that Julian and I, had discussed. So we thought it would be best to update those schedules and also give a little bit of an overview and an answer sheet. So that's the first memo that's sitting there on page 14 of your packet. There was a discussion. The one thing, and I would bring you to. Nope, I just lost the page. I'm sorry. Where is it? 2 pages down, I believe it is. Yes, if you can just go to page 16 for 1 second. It's related to my memo there. This was a schedule that was prepared by Bob Bakers, and he was submitted. And I would just point out to you, under June 30th of 2018, 4 columns over from the right, you'll see a large increase in both revenues, depreciation, and the bottom line, the change in net assets. Okay. The question had come up as to what that is. There was a large construction project taken on to reconstruct the clubhouse, and this ended up being done on the city side of the ledger books, paying for through bond money and or pay-as-you-go money as it went along. Upon completion of the project, this project, which was roughly $4 million, a little bit over $4 million, the accounting for it was transferred into the golf fund. So it comes in as a contribution on the revenue side. That's the large increase during that period of time, bringing it up to over $6 million. You'll notice under the depreciation line, that also jumps up from 17 to 18. And the reason for that is the added depreciation to this large asset that is now associated with the enterprise fund. The increase in your two bottom lines there of $4 million for the year is related directly to the assets increasing on the financial handling of this transaction to get it into the enterprise fund. So you'll see your bottom line there, your ending balance went from negative 268,000 in 17 up to a positive $4 million. And the reason for that is the capital asset. Other comments that were questioned was with the pandemic, the effect that it had on the operation. After talking to the golf course folks, public works people, they provided a little bit of a narrative about the way quite a few golf courses in the area have seen a financial gain to the pandemic because people are going out to a limited number of activities, or able to go out to a limited number of activities, and one of them is golf. Whether it's getting a tee time or going to the driving range, whatever, courses that are open are seeing an increase. As far as moving forward, of course, we don't know the length or the outcome of the pandemic moving forward, but the question about the business model came up, and it's kind of the same thing. As of right now, with the increased level of play, there does not appear to be a large change in the business model of the course, but they are seeing, opportunities out there, which kind of goes under letter B in the next page there in the memo, where because of the outcomes of the increase in play right now, there seems to be a new market that they can advertise to. Finding where the geographic areas are that most players are coming from, to try to get these players coming back on a returning schedule, have them constantly coming back, finding what the course is about, the personality of the course. If they like it, people will return. So overall, as far as the business plan, there does, at this present time, does not appear to have drastic changes. It's more of a moving forward to keep the momentum going. And again, with their business model, with the consultant that they do have on board right now, they're trying to move it so that it does have a net positive P&L effect at the end of the year. which that was kind of an overview of questions that were raised by the schedules that were submitted. I can go into, each schedule. I don't know if there's any questions on the memo part of it, or I can move on to the schedules.
Actually, I did have a question, on the schedule, the first schedule you were referring to, the combined statement of revenue and expenditures. When you look at 18, I just wanted to bring to the members' attention, is that without that transaction, and those were capital contributions, I'm assuming that came in, that's what I read in the footnotes, that in 2018, 4.5 million came in capital contributions for that capital improvement. And if that transaction did not occur in 18, you would have experienced a negative change in assets of 286,000. So that plugged into the trend, you would have went from a negative 371 to 286 to 290. So the trend continued. It popped up again in 19 is the audited statements are saying, but I can see that you're anticipating in 20 that your negative change in operations would only be about $23,000. Now, one budget item in that change recap is stating that you're looking for a budget that would have a $3,000 positive surplus change for that year. However, the schedules behind it are showing a budget of 2 negatives. So I'm wondering which one is the real budget?
The one that I have been working on has got the $3,000 surplus, and in addition, where is it? There was a comment from. I'm trying to find where it is. Bear with me 1 second.
So I just want to bring to your attention, Mike, that the summary of Kinney Park and Goodwin Park operations fiscal year 18 through 21 budget to actuals, that budget has a $152,000 deficit is what it's showing. So and the one that you're working with shows a $3,000 profit. The error in the tie out is the revenue line. So I just want to bring that to everyone's attention and make sure that we have the proper documents that tie out.
Okay, let me, if I can, look at that again and
Please.
get back to you on that one.
Thank you. The other item would be the fiscal year 20 actuals unaudited is showing a deficit of 76,000, while the recap that you were referring to is 23,000. So those are the two columns that aren't tying out properly. That would need to have a relook, but we can take this offline.
Oh, okay. If I can just I'll make one comment towards the unaudited column there for June 30th. That was as of September 14th. That was the original submittal, and I believe mine was 10. The other one is 10/19. I believe it's my date.
10/22.
On the followed up schedule.
Okay.
Right.
That would be the one issue with the audits.
Okay, so
I
we're
would
at
confirm that in that the draft that was provided by Bob Bakers at the last subcommittee was right after we had closed the fiscal year, and the unaudited statements that Mike provided now was the first draft for review for the final audit statement. So there is a timing difference there, and a lot of prep work done for year end in between.
Okay, so all right, I can understand that, but then what about the budget? I would assume the budget would have already set.
Right, and we'll look into the budget variance for you.
Right, I'll look into that one, please.
Okay.
And the other thing too, I just want to is the 2018, the addition of the Keeney Golf Course Clubhouse.
Yes.
and I know you mentioned the effect on year end, but I would just like to point out that that would be an apples to apples comparison, because the financial statements prior to June 30 year end included the fixed assets. So whenever there's a fixed asset change, especially something as material as a renovation of the clubhouse, you will see an increase that fiscal year that the project is completed to the fund balance.
I understand, Leanne, that's not the point I was attempting to make. What I was trying to make was that the one-time contribution as it was coming through shows like a distorted. So it is the asset that is causing the fund balance to change. But if you wanted to carve out the operational piece of it, operationally, if you pull out that contribution, because it's only related to putting the assets on the book, it's not an operational, it's a one-time. Then what I was trying to note was they would have had a deficit of 286. That's all.
Gotcha.
All right. This is Bob White. I've got a question on the memo. Just to get to the bottom line, my understanding is that with an increase of about 10% in the number of rounds played, or about 6,000, that you would be in a break-even position and not need a subsidy. Is that kind of the bottom line? Lou?
This is Mike again. I'm sorry. I don't have that information. I would have to get some input from the golf course people on that.
Okay. No, I was just looking at your memo on number 3, business model. The last sentence, which kind of runs on, says would allow. It looks like that if there were an increase of 8 to 10% in the number of rounds, it would allow the golf operations to reach a point of profitability where the general fund subsidy wouldn't be needed. And you had about 60,000 rounds in FY20, so 10% would be another 6,000 rounds.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes, I see what you're saying with that. Yes, I'm sorry.
I was just trying to figure out what the bogey was, so to speak.
But Bob,
Sorry.
and correct me, Mayor, if this is the case, but if Mike, if I recall, there are operational pieces that have been, whether you're getting the subsidy line, and to me, the subsidy line looks like it's just almost covering the depreciation that's loaded for the paper. And the other piece of it is the operation side, where the golf operation manager and some, I think, maintenance costs are being paid for from the city. I think you centralized that.
Mike, can you address that?
Yolita, are you on the line? Can you? I don't know if you have that answer.
It is in your memo under the model. It says it offsetted by the hiring of a city employed golf operational manager. So it said city employed, and some possible increases in the course maintenance. Is that where I think that you have a golf manager that's being paid for by the city, not by this operation?
I can jump in there, Kim, if you'd like. So currently, the city is paying PGA as a consultant through the golf fund.
There you go.
And that contract is expiring. And then they will offset the expenses of that contract with the hiring of a new employee who I understand, and maybe Yolita will be charged to the golf fund.
Oh, okay.
So it's a swing in expenses, but not necessarily a reduction in expenses.
Right, which would then refer to the 150 as being subsidized by the city. So in addition to the 2 in 19, right, there is another piece that's a subsidy.
Well, I would say it wouldn't be an additional subsidy, right? So the 150,000 contract with PGA goes away. The city hires a golf operations manager And they may have an increase in the contracts on the maintenance fees.
Right.
So I don't know the exact breakdown there, if it's a even offset or if there's mild savings or if there will be eventual increase. I don't know if Yulita can jump in there.
No, I just wanted to refer to, just to bring to the members' attention that there were expenses being paid from the city. So you're not going to see those expenses recorded in this, in these financials.
Oh, just to clarify, Kim, there is no current golf operations manager, city employee. This would be a new position charged
Right.
to the golf fund. Right.
Which would
so
be,
it wouldn't be coming out of DPW's budget. It would be a direct expense hitting the golf fund. So the general fund is not covering that expense. I
okay,
think that's
so
what you're trying to say. Yeah.
that is exactly what I'm trying to ask. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay.
Yeah, setting aside the sort of the accounting and the budgeting kind of thing, what is a bottom line? What is the goal for the golf course? Is it to make it self-sustaining? Is it simply to because it is a valuable asset to the city, and I'm sure it has returns that go beyond the budget. Exactly what is the goal for the golf courses?
I'll speak to that. I mean, look, I would say our goal on the golf courses is to make them self-sustaining. At minimum, to get them to a place where, you know, any funding that we set aside is, you know, funding depreciation and not operations. So that's our goal, and that's the, you know, the reason we've made the operational improvements that we've made. You know, we'll have to see whether the increase in play that we saw this year generates into a longer term increase in play at the courses as people kind of, you know, rediscover and maybe some new people come and check out the courses. But that's our goal.
Good. I mean, because they are very valuable assets in the city. I mean, it really just, the parks just add something to the city, and hopefully all our friends in New York City will discover that and move here.
It's great to see that the number of rounds have increased and increased a lot from 19 to 20.
Yeah.
Do you know, does anybody have an update on fiscal year 21? And have you still continued to see that increase compared to the prior year?
Mike, I don't know if you have it. I can't give you
I know on the next
head, but I think anecdotally,
schedule, the next schedule does have the number of rounds. I don't have a so as a percentage wise, it seems like they are up. I don't have a comparison for the same period of time, but
okay.
On page 17 there, it does show that as of now there is almost 31,000 rounds played.
Right. Okay. Year over year.
This is Mark.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll get into the rounds of play. It seems obvious that the rounds of play is driving the budget for revenue
Sure.
for both Keeney and Goodwin. Previous years up to 20, obviously there was a significant difference in actuals versus budgeted with 20 being unusually high, probably because of COVID. But as of 10/22, according to the chart, the difference is about 23,000 rounds. We don't know what it's going to be for the remainder of the year. Hopefully, we'll catch up to what the budget it is, 54. My concern is, and I'm just, you know, I don't think anybody anticipated COVID to increase rounds. So my concern is, as we budget, or as I look at this budget, in budgeting, historical budgeting, and maybe it's going to be a new norm for Keeney and Goodwin, which would be a good thing for increased rounds, that there be, it appears, in order to get to the mayor's goal and everybody's goal to have it self-sufficient, that we not inflate rounds to match the budget, because we're running at deficits historically, except for last year, which was the unusual year due to COVID. So, you know, you can create a budget by starting with expenses and adjusting income, or you can start with income and adjusting expenses. Historically, the golf courses have shown deficits. The goal is to get them self-sufficient, but I wouldn't use COVID as a model of self-sufficiency unless it's going to be a new norm. People start working from home for the rest of their lives, and they want to play a round of golf midday between meetings. It's a good thing for the city, but that would take some historical trends. So I just be cautious in the budgeting for the golf courses. That's all I'm saying.
Mark, I think we certainly agree with that. And, you know, in this budget, I think we tried to estimate the number of rounds, not by what we needed, but by what we thought we'd get. And, you know, I think we're running ahead of schedule, keeping in mind that, you know, that in this fiscal year is still the March to June 30th time period as well. So I think COVID's going to put us ahead of where we were or where we budgeted. And I do think that we budgeted based on, you know, what we thought we could drive, you know, even with normal expectations. You know, my point about looking forward is I don't think there's any question that you're right, that we're not going to see the same sustained increase in play after the pandemic ends. But what I hope we might see is some lingering benefits of, you know, people who have rediscovered these courses during this time.
Yeah, good point.
Could I interject something that might be helpful? This is Steve Felsick now.
Go ahead, Stephen.
So I actually am on the board of a country club in the New Haven area, Racebrook, and we saw a 40% increase in our rounds from last year, all due to COVID, though we did not realize any rounds from our outside tournaments. We call them outside tournaments. So I would caution, and we're in the middle of our budget, and I actually, as a member, I have been asked to oversee our food and beverage operations, and which we've actually successfully had. We've actually had a good year with it, surprisingly. But without the outside tournaments, we found a marketed increase in the rounds, all due to the COVID. So what we're hoping for, and this might be something for you to plug into your analysis, is that I'm sure that there's going to be outside tournaments that you've lost that you will regain, which should offset some of the increase in your rounds. I'm not sure if you count the outside tournaments and the rounds from the outside tournaments as a single round or not. That's how we do it. But I would, and I've cautioned everybody as far as rounds being played, that when things do get back to normal, I think you're going to see things revert back to pre-COVID rounds being played. And what we're hoping is that, and this is something I think the city might want to try to do, is to promote it through groups and organizations to keep your realized increase in rounds around the same. So just a suggestion.
Thank you. All right. Any other comments, or shall we move on? Okay, then let's move on to the sensitivity analysis of the grand list projections. Which is quite helpful. Thank you.
Okay, this is Mike, and again, this was something that was submitted through the 5-year plan that was submitted a couple months ago. There were questions that were raised about some of the assumptions that were in the document. You know, what would happen in this case? What happens if our grand list increase was not as high? And it could go either direction. If it was not as high as the assumption that was made. So what we ended up doing was going back into the original schedule, and for each each basis point, change in the grand list, and kind of did it in two formats. One, if it's an independent event, meaning 1 year is off, but the others are accurate. And at each level of 100% here, this would be the bottom line tax effect at each level. So, and again, the 5-year plan assumption was 0.69 with 2020, 3.5, 1.5, 1.5. This chart, again, shows what the bottom line cost would be if there was a reduction, or the increase fell below what the assumption was in the plan. So as you can see on an individual basis, even if it was out to 2023, which would be the highest dollar effect, at a 0.1% of a reduction to the grand list growth would be roughly $285,000 for the year. It is a number that's there, but in the size of our budget, the $285,000 is within reason of being able to adjust our budget back and forth if this were to happen. The second half of the chart there would be if it was a multiplier effect. Every year was off by 10 basis points, 0.1% there. If this happened each and every year, the bottom right-hand column, again, now I would kind of call it the worst case scenario, would be roughly $1.2 million effect. Yes, it is a bigger number, but a lot of the assumption that is there is that this issue would happen year after year after year. While nobody has the crystal ball in front of them, we would lean towards that would being a worst case scenario that the future budgets would have to address.
I just want to jump in, and I apologize. This may reflect this is my fault for not having weighed on this earlier. I would not regard that as worst case scenario. I think the worst case scenario is far worse than that. And the biggest impact, will be in the reval, which we're still counting on that 3.5% increase. If that turns into a significant decrease, we're talking about a whole different ballgame.
Understand. And or if it fell below an entire 1%, because we took it to a one basis point, right? We could have gone 2 or more.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think the risk here is far greater than this.
But I like the exercise. I think it is helpful to bring such to the table, and I'm glad that you went through this exercise. So this is really good forward thinking. But I do agree with you, Mayor, on your point. Any comments?
Hello. Please leave a message after the tone.
Okay.
Oh, sounds like we're leaving a message for someone.
I think we are.
This is Mark. I agree that with the mayor that the reval is the multiplier of this exercise. Yet it's a good exercise to see, and I do agree with the previous statement. Excuse me, that the mayor said that continue with the reval on time, rather than I don't want to say kick the can down the road. That's too political. But to delay it. I would concur with his opinion to see the known as soon as possible so we can address it rather than continue with the unknowns.
I mean, the one thing I will say about that is that I think proceeding with the reval on schedule is highly unlikely to generate the 3.5% increase that we have built into our plan. However, delaying the reval may result in an even worse outcome.
Totally agree.
Well, thank you for bringing this forward. I think it is helpful for us to take a look at this, and I think it was a good exercise. Moving on to the next sensitivity analysis that we have in our packet, let's look at the general wages and increases and that impact potential.
Okay. Again, the schedule you have there was modified a couple times where, Mr. Dakers had submitted this for the prior meeting. And I am on page 23 here. This is the status up at the top of the contracts that are out there and through which year there is an agreement. As you would see, the cells there that are white, with no coloring, is an existing contract with the wage increase that's there. The blue are the forecasted numbers. And what we ended up asking originally was, excuse me, for the expenses that were in the plan, what increase would be with each level of general wage increase, ranging from 0 to 2%. And you'll see what the total salary line was in that table 2. And again, this would be all totals with the. Nope. Am I still on?
Yes, you are.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Okay. For each of the expenses that is related to annual increases, the going into the next page, it talks about the effect on the pension plan. Again, because of the increase in wages, where someone's pension would change based on the earnings that they had. If you go in the, I think where everyone's really looking is on page 24 towards the middle, the forecasted annual variance. That is the effect of basically the mathematical formula. What was in the plan versus what the prior numbers we were just discussing were. Here is the difference by year, by wage category, by wage level, and then by expense category. Originally, I believe there was certain of the benefit type numbers were not included in the analysis. This was one that was resent, having pretty much everything that had a relationship to salary included. So in the bottom of page 25, you do have the total. Well, we'll call the total, which would be salary, benefits, pension, etc., and that would be the effect of wage increases at each level by fiscal year.
Thank you, Michael. This is I like the format. I have to be honest with you, Julie, and I definitely looked at this, and it's a modeling format, and something for us to continue to keep an eye on, and we can pull it up as you start to go through the negotiations of those contracts. Any questions for the committee on this sensitivity analysis and the impact, which would be substantial if people got a 2% increase, in your out years?
This Mark?
Yes, Mark.
The bottom line is the blue is for every, you're assuming a 2% increase. Let's look at the bottom one, 2%, where it's 8 million in 2025. That's assuming that all of the bargaining units that are in the blue up at the first scenario all of those bargaining units, the fire, the state, with the exception of the non-unions, because they were under contract throughout that date, are going to get 2% that year. So it's a cumulative effect, assuming that you're bargaining the same percentage for all of those units when those units hit the bargaining table. Is that correct?
That would be correct, yes. Anything that's shaded in blue in that first, at the top of the letter would be replaced with a 2%. This would be the effect.
I got you.
But I want to stress,
And-
this is not what we are negotiating. This is not what we
Oh, I
are
agree.
seeking to negotiate. These
I
are just
understand.
notional numbers to give you a sense of,
Oh,
comparison.
I fully
Yeah,
understand.
Yeah, sensitivity, if something should happen, understand.
And the second question is, the GWI, now I assume that some of these contracts have steps in them, or the people move from, in teaching, it's step 1 to step 2, step 3, step 4, degree change, etc. Here they have step A, B, C in the firefighters and patrol versus, etc. Those step increases are not included in this GWI because you don't know who's going to be in what particular step at any particular time. So these numbers in the blue are somewhat less than what the actuals would be, because we would be have to incorporate the movement, if you will, from step A to step B to step C. Is that correct?
This is Mike again. I would have to research that as to what is in the original plan.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean,
Okay.
it's just that in previous contracts on the city side, MARB has seen GWIs. On the board side, we see GWI plus increment, which is the step movement. And traditionally, when you have only the GWI, that number is less than the total because there's movement along the way. But that's fine. I mean, it's going to be what's going to be at the time of negotiations anyway, so that's fine.
This is Luke. I'm hoping what I'm about to say is accurate. If it's not, we need to fix it. But I think that our projections already include the step increases in those projections. What we don't include are
good.
GWIs.
Yeah, that is correct. May I just
Okay.
confirm that is correct?
Thank you, Yolita. So that's, we've made sure to include that in our forecasting. But just, keeping in mind that the plan that we have, which we have discussed many times, already has future deficits in the next few years, even with a fairly, in what now appears to be an unlikely increase in grand list.
Right.
Includes 0 GWIs. So, when we layer GWIs on top of the existing deficit and then add in, the fact that we will likely not see the grand list growth that's in plan, these deficits are significant.
Understood.
Any other questions? All right, the next item in your packet for us to discuss is the IT plan. IT corrective action that we didn't talk about earlier. Oh, no, workman's comp. I'm sorry, workman's comp.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
Can we do workman's comp first?
No, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I was on mute there. Yes, the workers' comp issue, I guess, was something that had come up, and Bob was able to find a letter. I thought I saw a date on the letter of a study that was done for one of the bargaining units, 716 salary continuation. And I have not been involved with this one, but this was one of the letters that Bob had submitted, and I believe this is a year at least old.
Right.
That talks about projected savings. Yes, please, somebody.
Did we lose you?
Mike is here. I thought someone was jumping in on that. Yeah. So again, this letter was something that was out of the file that was submitted. I get at somebody's request.
So I guess we should take a look at this. If we're looking at workman's comp and looking at, changing policy is what I think it was alluding to, in an upcoming bargaining unit and something for us to take a look at from a workman comp perspective. It was to change the plan to try to get workers back sooner.
Correct, and also the monitoring and or renegotiation of what the workers' comp continuation of benefits, would be as a cost savings measure. Yes.
Okay. And when is the 17? Okay,
But,
so this is
but I will just say that our focus, obviously that some of that latter piece has to be done through contract.
right.
Some of the other stuff has to be done through contract too, but we are trying to just get better at getting employees back, whether it's on light duty or full duty, faster.
Right. And that contract, if we're just focusing on one, so are you looking, it would have to then be put into the contract when the contract comes up?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I thought. All right. Well, it's something to make sure that we keep your eye on for negotiation.
Yeah.
Then next item is the IT plan and for public safety.
Okay. Again, this was a response to questions that had come up, and if I could go to the last page first, is the fire department gave their description of what was happening, and they also had in there, I believe it was a mid-September estimated time range to have their security plan in place. And I did confirm with the fire department that they did complete their plan during the month of September. There was a letter that was submitted to for the prior meeting concerning the police and their corrective action plan for the police department, which kind of caused, I guess, more questions than it answered, discussing how they had 54 laptops, 20 that required encryption, things like that. Since there were questions asked or commented, so I'm going to go back to page 30 of the handout, which is kind of a follow-up to questions that arose from the memo of the prior month. Reason being is there was the status where they're continuing to work on it, but there needed to be a clarification on the number of laptops and on the location of the laptops and what their security was needed or not needed. So under number 2 on this memo, numbers have been corrected in this memo, where there's 24 of them that require the encryption. These are all used by the administrative staff, and they are in the process of moving those forward to get those done. The balance of the laptops are used at the academy, more as a teaching tool where there is no sensitive data on there. And that kind of followed up a question of that was created of, we have all these laptops, Why are only some of them being encrypted and some do not? Do they have access to possibly jeopardize the city moving forward? So, and that was kind of what was trying to be addressed here, that there's no data on them that at this point would require the encryption. The laptops for the academy stay at the academy unless somebody has to go, a remote training session. But again, there is no what they call law enforcement sensitive data on that device, and they do not access secured sites. The computers that do have access to, whether it's federal sites, state sites, other secured websites, which should have some kind of security required, are mentioned below. The federal websites, the ones that they deal with, or the one that's stated here, has the two-factor authentication as one of their security measures. The other ones, their police department's telling me they can't be accessed remotely, and again, the academy does not use these on either type of site. The terminals that are in the cars are all secured with by physical means. I guess they're locked right into a holder in the car that cannot be released as far as a stealing or a theft situation. And then the vehicles are used basically round the clock. And the number 5 is a little bit more of a description of how they're secured into the vehicle with no key present at that point in time. So hopefully that kind of answered some of the follow-up questions from the original memo that was sent in the prior month.
Definitely for me, as I was one of them, because I didn't understand about the 30 laptops that were at the academy. So that is very helpful to know and to understand. I have no other questions as far as this is concerned. On this part of it, does anybody on the committee have a question on this, on the police? Okay, so you can update us on the fire. I did read the fire. Okay, go ahead.
The fire was the same thing, and they completed all of their plan during the month of September.
They did complete it because the memo
Yes.
had said it was projected to be, so I wasn't sure if it was completed.
Yes, that memo was issued. That was the memo for the prior month's meeting. So
Okay.
yes, it is confirmed as of now. They did complete it during September.
Okay, very good. So even in addition to I had one other question in the fire, and I am referring to the other memo because I didn't see an update focused on the fire piece of it. And that is that the chief's laptops are not encrypted. And that is the second to the last paragraph at the bottom of the fire. And so above that, it says that everything had been updated and they installed the BitLocker, and that phrase was completed. But if you go to the next stage, I'm assuming that this is separate. It says exceptions for the police, that their mobile data computers could not be removed from their vehicles. And so, but it also says exceptions for the chief. So is that an exception that they are not encrypted? Or am I misreading that?
Let me follow up with that question.
Thank you. All right. Any members have any other questions about this IT security plan? All right. The only item that I believe that we skipped over, was the update on the status of the Board of Education RFP and this special study at the July 23rd, West Haven, Hartford's subcommittee. Secretary McCaw, mentioned to the superintendent for her to, provide the subcommittee with a proposal of how the MARB could support the next steps. And so I'm wondering if the superintendent is on the phone with us today to discuss the special education study. All
Kim?
right. Yes, David?
This is
Mark.
Mark. Could I suggest that in our next subcommittee meeting that be placed? That's going to take a while to discuss because that's an issue that we have waded into quite heavily.
Yes, we have.
So can we defer that discussion to the next subcommittee meeting and maybe place that at the top of the agenda because that's going to take a while to go through. And 15 minutes remaining today, even if she was on the line, I don't think will give us sufficient time to wade into it fully.
Understand. So, David, if you are still on the phone from the Board of Ed? I guess not. We'll have Julian follow up with them and make sure that everybody is prepared for the next the next subcommittee, and that will be the first item on the agenda, as you suggested, Mark. And that concludes all of the agenda items, unless anybody has anything else that they want to mention.
This is Mark again. I hate to be not a Debbie Downer, but I want to say this publicly because I don't want to be fall out of line with freedom of information. Just to let you know that, and the committee members to know, this whole area of dealing with re-evaluation and things of that nature, and our discussions previously about revenue diversification options for the city of Hartford, other cities, what I'm going to be preparing for the subcommittee, maybe the next subcommittee, or for preparing for and giving to OPM through Julian and Melissa, is what I call revenue diversification eligibility or enhanced revenue eligibility, which is predicated on the eligibility is limited to municipalities that have tax-exempt property that exceeds 20%, excluding pilot funding property and municipal-owned property. The sum and substance of it, and forwarding it over to legal to put in proposed language would be something for us to look at and decide whether we choose not to do it or whatever. Because I do think that we're going to be faced with serious issues regarding Hartford's funding, especially on reval. It may not be necessary to use, but my concern is that there be an eligibility clause in the statute regarding MARB's ability to help communities in this area. I believe there are 3 communities that would fall into this category: Bridgeport, Waterbury, and Hartford. There may be more, but those are the top 3 that I see based on some research that I've done. And it's quick, so maybe when it gets in there, there'll be more, maybe less. And once they're determined to be eligible, then MARB basically would examine the needs of an eligible community regarding its budget, and they could authorize up to authorize the OPM secretary to implement the enhancement in a specific amount, not to exceed the maximum in accordance with CGF, Connecticut General Statutes, for pilot state-owned property, which is different than pilot property for hospitals and private colleges. So it's basically a 3-step process where you determine to be eligible. Authorization by MARB occurs up to a certain point, and similar to West Haven, the secretary can dole out money in accordance with restrictions and requirements that are placed on them through MARB. It doesn't call for additional money. It comes out of the pilot fund. So determining eligibility means that there's money set aside within the pilot fund for communities that are under MARB's oversight. I don't know what the amount of money would be in its totality, but it would be, I don't think it would be that much of a hit for other communities if these municipalities are determined. And right now there's only one, Hartford, but should Bridgeport or Waterbury or any community that meets this eligibility could be authorized. And the simple reasoning is when you have a tax base that's so restrictive by nature of its tax-exempt property, non-state owned funding, regardless of the percentage of its funding from the state, it places that community in a very difficult position, obviously, being it doesn't. And if we as a MARB group determine that that city or the leadership of that city has done everything that we've asked, and they still cannot provide the services for their citizenry that are necessary, then there may be an obligation that we have to help them along a little more based on that determination. So the vehicle that I'm suggesting and bring to the subcommittee for their perusal is this diversification of all the ones that are out there. I think this is the one that would be more palatable politically, but that's for future discussions. And I just wanted to share that with the subcommittee to make them aware rather than it being a surprise. And if it goes someplace, fine. If it doesn't, fine. But I do have serious concerns about Hartford hitting the wall at some point in time and what our obligation is when it does hit the wall.
Thank you, Mark.
So it's an FYI for lack of a better term. Thank you.
No, thank you, Mark, and appreciate you looking into this. If you can share that with Julian, we can at least have an opportunity to look at that and bring it to the Secretary's attention.
Most definitely.
Thank you.
This is Bob. Thank you, Mark. There ought to be a process, we've discussed this before, where if there are any other revenue enhancement proposals or otherwise coming from the MARB, coming from the city, I think that would be good to get it going because I hear the mayor loudly and clearly, and I think we should have some things in the ready, before trouble hits. I think as a result of the planning here, we do have time, and I think we ought to use it well because, in a crisis, I think it's time to, relook at things that perhaps have been considered not doable before, because I am concerned, as is, a number of people. So just that's a process for Kim, for you and OPM to consider about how to get that funnel going.
Understand. Yep. Yep. All right. And we are 5 minutes away from our closing time. Does anybody else have any other things that they'd like to discuss?
This is Luke. Can I add one thing?
Yes, Luke.
I know I've said this before, but I do think I just keep building on the comments that were just made. I think it's worth just keeping in our mind the fact that there was a major revenue diversification initiative undertaken by the legislature, passed by the legislature in the form of the municipal revenue sharing account. The implementation of that was delayed until the next biennium. I have no doubt that it will be the first thing to be delayed again or pushed back, but that is something that I think I will be advocating be at least preserved at least in part, and a number of other municipalities may be arguing should be preserved in part, and that's, one potential, way of addressing the revenue diversification. But I always try to keep a spotlight on that one.
Thank you for bringing it to our attention. All right, any other comments? Shall we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Mark,
Bob White.
second, Mark.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And we have adjourned. Thank you. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Have a good day.
Thank you
everyone.
all. Good luck.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye now.